Okay. Well, hi everyone. Welcome. We are doing a costing review workshop. Today's the last day of your class. I really hope you know that before now, because if not, it's going to be a rude wake-up call. But yeah, we're going to be doing a costing review, going through everything that you learned, really just hitting all those principles, all the equations, how to know what to do when. I do want to point out while I'm going to wait a second, where you can find us. So on your class page, and this isn't any class you're in, at the very top, you'll have a Start Here section. That is where you find online tutoring. So if you go to online tutoring, that is me and the rest of the tutoring team. If you click this blue link, you can schedule a one-on-one session with us. This is really more just going forward in all your other classes. If you have any areas you're struggling with, we are here to help you. Here's all of us. This is our schedule. This does change a little bit from term to term. So just make sure you're paying attention to that. But all the Zoom links to join these classes, because we are Sunday, 2 p.m. Central Time costing, that's the one you're in. These are all your Zoom links to join all of them for all the things we're doing. And this is really why I wanted to point this out to you guys. If you're struggling with your last class with this costing and just all of the information, all of these are recorded. So if you go into this costing right here, it'll pull up this document. These are all of your recorded sessions, really, workshops that you either were in, missed, whatever. And we have them so you can know exactly which one, what date, and what we're talking about. So if you're struggling with AP price, EP price, and yield, and that's the bulk of where you're struggling, you can jump in and watch mine or Chef Sissy's recordings, all these YouTube videos. They're just a great resource for you guys, and you can watch them in your own time. So highly recommend those, at least if you need the help today. If you need any review of anything, those are all there and extremely helpful. Something else to note, if you have yet to figure this out in your class, depending on your instructor, underneath your lesson and your week, it'll say formula sheet. I know like Chef Nick says helpful hints. They're all essentially the same concept, helpful hints. These sheets are like gold, liquid gold, paper gold. These will tell you a lot of your costing formulas. They give you example problems. They literally walk you through everything that I'm about to tell you, broken down and explained. So if you have not looked at these yet, I encourage you to look at them, print them out, reference them during your test, because this is essentially everything you will see on your test are on these problems, on these helpful hints that you can find on your class page right underneath that test. So that is a whole different tangent that I won't go off too far on. So we'll get actually started on some of the stuff. And again, I am going to go kind of quickly because I am covering your 6 weeks in like 50 minutes. So just bear with me there. I will try to open it up for questions here and there. If you have a question or if you're not understanding something, throw it in the chat. Chef Sissy's here with us and she is manning that chat. I'll look at it as well. Definitely want to answer any questions you have, any help you need to make sure you pass this course if you're on that edge, or just to get a better understanding of everything going on that we're doing, because this is the bulk of it. I mean, you can be the best chef in the entire world, but if you don't know how to make money doing it, you're going to go out of business. So this is the bread and the butter of your bread and butter. Get it? Anyway, that was a little joke, but kind of covering just some basic kitchen stuff, basic principles. When you're rounding, you're using rounding a lot. In a lot of this class, you're rounding to the nearest cent. 0 through 4 stays the same, or as what I like to say are nice numbers. They don't make their neighbor next to them change who they are. They're so nice, they let them stay exactly as is. 5 through 9, we round up, or mean, bossy numbers. They boss their neighbor around and tell them what to do. And so because they're so mean and so bossy, their neighbor next to them has to change who they are. And they have to go up. So rounding, again, you're always looking, whatever spot you're looking for, whether it be the nearest cent, which is that 100 spot that you see in green here, the nearest whole, the nearest percent, whatever you're looking for, you're always looking to one spot to the right to determine what to do. When we are rounding portions, serving, size, things like that, you never round. Forget everything I just said. Everything to the right of that decimal falls off and drops because you can't serve a partial portion. You can't serve half a cheeseburger to somebody and charge them full price. So when you're talking how many portions, servings can we make, just know that you do not round. You drop everything. Common kitchen conversions, these are really, really important. If you do not have a cheat sheet, I recommend having one up on your computer, written down, just knowing them. Eventually you'll just know them, but until you do, have it in front of you. One handy dandy thing to just point out, Google is your best friend. If you forget something or you can't remember something, throw it in Google. It will tell you. If you forget how many ounces are in a pound and you don't have a cheat sheet, even though you should, throw it in Google. How many ounces are in a pound? Google will tell you. So use those resources to your advantage. They are there for you and you can use them. Along with those, like I was saying, those helpful hints that your chefs are giving you, you can use those on your tests. You can literally have all these resources open in front of you. It might take you a little longer to do the test because you're referencing back to things, but that's okay. I mean, if you've already taken the test once, if not twice, and you have only one attempt left, or you have all attempts, I guess either way, take your time. That is the biggest thing, especially in this class. Take your time, read the full question. I don't know how many students get something wrong on their tests because they're not answering the right question. It has nothing to do with your math capabilities, your learning capabilities, your understanding of the curriculum at all. It's just not reading the question. That's it. I know that sounds, I'm going to say it like 80 times in the next hour. So read the question. I can't stress that enough. The question will tell you what to do. It really will. Break it down, read it slowly, reread it 80 times until you understand, what is this question even asking me? And then based on that, it will be hopefully pretty obvious what you need to do. That's a whole different piece of advice. Another just helpful piece of advice is, as you are reading the question and breaking it down and understanding what it's asking of you, once you get your final answer, put your answer in terms to your question and think, does that even make sense? Because if you are doing your math wrong, or you're like myself and you're dyslexic and you're like flip-flopping numbers, dividing by the wrong thing, multiplying when you should divide, what have you, I'd say 90% of the time, your answer is not going to make sense at all. So just think about that final answer in context to what this question's asking, and it doesn't help you get the right answer, but it will help you know if you are wrong. And then if you are wrong, or like, you're like, that doesn't make any sense. You know you did something wrong. Go back, figure it out, start over. That's just random pieces of advice. Anyway, kind of moving on. Week 1 formulas, now that we've covered some of that basic stuff, is how many servings can you make? How many portions do we have? So basically, this is telling you, you have this amount in your kitchen that you've bought. This amount is in our serving size. How many servings can we make out of what we got? One huge thing to note, and this kind of goes with all of your questions along the way, you always want to make sure you're in the same unit of measure before you start doing your math. So looking at our example problem, we have 800 ounces of cheese. Each portion uses 12 ounces. How many portions can you make? Now, because we're both in ounces and ounces, you can just do the math. If this said I had 80 pounds of cheese, each uses 12 ounces, you would need to convert pounds to ounces first, then do your math. So you always want to make sure you're in the same unit of measure before you start doing the math for the equation. That's huge. And then,
hey, Chef.
Yeah.
On the example, you said 80. Was it 80 or is it 800?
It's 800. I was saying if this was
Okay,
pounds.
okay.
I'm making stuff up.
Okay.
Good question though. But yeah, so you basically go in and please, please, please grab a calculator, grab your phone, do the math with me because it will really help. So going forward, if you have 800, thanks Joy, 800 ounces of cheese, each portion uses 12 ounces. You're basically taking that 800 and dividing it by 12. And that will get you 66.66666666667. Now we're talking servings and portion sizes. You can never serve a partial portion. So everything to the right of that decimal drops off. And the answer
70. Is that 67 or 70?
It is
that's where I get
66. So because
Well, I thought you said we go up. Oh, it's
No.
portion. We don't drop.
Exactly. So when you're talking portions and servings, you can never serve partial of a portion. And basically, again, just breaking down what is this question asking you and just thinking of it logically will really, really help you. Because if you're thinking about your portions and your servings, you're trying to figure out how many dishes you can serve with the ingredients you have is essentially the goal. And so if you run into this and you have 66.66666, this answer in there, this 0.66 isn't a whole serving. You're not going to serve somebody a 2/3 of a pizza. You're just not going to, that's your leftover. That's what I call is the chef's food, is that partial portion. So again, everything to the right of that decimal drops off. Always making sure you're in the same unit of measure, going along the same principles. How much do you need to order, or how much do you need to buy? How much do you need to fulfill what you're trying to make is essentially what this is asking us. So with this, you would take however many servings that you need to make, you would multiply it by your portion size. And that's how much you need to order. So again, same idea. If we had 62 salads we want to make, each portion uses 2 ounces of tomato. How much tomatoes do we need to order? You would just take your 62 salads, multiply it by 2, because each salad has 2 ounces, and you would need to order 124 ounces. So again, 62 multiplied by 2, and we get 124. So these are kind of basic, but going with them, how many servings can you make? How much do you need to order? So really your week 1 questions, kind of diving in, going right into that week 2 stuff. So how much does 1 portion serving cost? Now this one I have been working with some of you and a lot of students in the past week. This is where a lot of you are having problems, and that's okay. So I definitely want to cover this. So when you're looking at how much does 1 portion serving cost, it's basically asking you how much did you spend for the amount you are serving, not the amount you bought, the amount you're serving or the portion you're using. So again, breaking it down to your unit of measure. So in this example, if we buy tomatoes for $2.50 for 16 ounces or per pound, same thing, each portion uses 5 ounces. How much does each portion cost? This question is asking us, if we spend $2.50 for 16 ounces, how much did we spend for 5 ounces? So your first step is you will want to get your price per unit or your price per ounce. So if you take that $2.50 and you divide it by 16, because you know there's 16 ounces in a pound, that gets us 0.15625. Now, something super, 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 I'm going to say it a million times, important. Never round early. Ever, never, never, never round early. Keep this number in your calculator. And then you would multiply this number by 5, because this is our price per ounce. And when you multiply it by 5, we are trying to find our price for 5 ounces. So we know our price per ounce, we know our price per pound. Now we want to know 5 ounces. So you take this number, you multiply it by 5, and that gets us with 0.78125. This is when you round. You always want to round at the very end. If you round early and then do your math, your final answer could be off by a couple pennies, one way or the other. And if you're off by a couple cents, And let's say you're off the other way, you're off and you went lower than you should be. Think of it in terms of your restaurant in real life, in the real world. If you're off by 5 cents on one dish on your menu and you serve that dish 100 times every night for a year, that's going to be thousands of dollars you lost because of a rounding error. That is like real life example. It happens and it should never happen. So that is huge. Do not round early till the end. So anyway, kind of reiterating what I said, you're always going to find your price per unit. So you can do this with anything. You're not always dividing by 16. I really want to point that out because some people think that. No, you are doing whatever unit you're in. So whatever your portion units are, that's what you want to find your price of, the price per that unit, and then you can multiply. So with that being said, if you're in gallons and you're trying to go to cups, you would want to find your price per cup. If you're in quarts and you're trying to go to tablespoons, you need to find your price per tablespoon. So always trying to find that price per unit of measure and then going forward. So looking at this one, this is a great example, walking through it. You would, let's say we buy steak for $29.99 a pound. Our serving size is 6 ounces. How much does one portion cost? So what that's asking us, again, always breaking down, what is this asking me? And then going forward. This is asking us if we spent $29.99 for 16 ounces, how much does 6 ounces cost? Is essentially what this is asking. So you take your $29.99, divide it by 16, and that gets us $1.874375. Keeping this big long number in your calculator, multiply that by 6 because we have 6 ounces and that's what we're looking for price-wise. And that gets us 11.24625 with rounding to the nearest cent. That would be $11.25. So let's see. That's the same thing. Okay, I'm going to stop it here briefly. We still have a lot to cover, but I just want to make sure, check in. Is everyone understanding everything I just said?
You're kind of fast, but it's okay.
I'm sorry, it will be fast. I mean, I'm covering essentially 6 weeks of learning in 50 minutes. So it's going to be fast and I apologize for that. If you need any specific help, again, throughout any specific week, those archived workshops are great because those are basically going through each week for a full hour. So those are definitely helpful. So kind of moving on, and I really, really want to point out something here. Your food cost percentage, again, breaking down that question, what is it asking you? Your food cost percentage is asking you how much you spent on ingredients in terms of how much you sold it for. What percent was spent on ingredients is basically what it's asking. Now, kind of jumping ship on you. This question, this exact same formula, you see twice. You visit it twice. They're two different things, same thing. Different context. The one in week 3, you're doing your food cost percentage for a specific dish, for a specific ingredient, for your pasta, for your salad, whatever. And it's your food cost divided by your total sales. That will give you a decimal. It should always, always, always give you a decimal. If you do not get a decimal, you did something wrong and you probably flip-flopped or did something weird. So always get a decimal. You would then multiply by 100 or move your decimal 2 spots to the right to get it into a percentage. This formula here we see on week 5. Don't worry, I'll come back. But week 5, what is your total food cost? It's the exact same formula. Your total food cost divided by your sales is your food cost percent. This in week 5 versus week 3 is talking big picture for the whole week. How much did we spend on food for the whole week? How much in sales for the whole week? So it's bigger numbers, more room for error because you have more to put in your calculator, but the equation is exactly the same. as what we did in week 3. Just one's for an ingredient or a dish, the other's for your entire week for your entire restaurant. So just really wanted to point that out. Going with the same steak platter ingredients, we have $4.79. That's what we spent on our steak platter ingredients. We sell it for $12. What is our food cost percentage? So you would take your $4.79 and you would divide it by 12. And we get 0.3991666. Multiply it by 100, move the decimal 2 spots to the right, whichever makes more sense to you. Do that one, it's all the same. I would honestly round this up to your nearest whole percent, and we would get 40%, rounded up from our 39.9. Yeah, that's your food cost percent, which is essentially, again, just putting that answer in context to the question, because it really helps you not only understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, but understand what you're looking for and how to get there. So what this is telling us, based off our math, is that it costs us, we spent 40% of what we made on ingredients alone, which is quite a bit, you know? That only leaves 60% left over for everything else, including labor, other costs, profit, you name it. So that is really important. This whole class is really important. Kind of moving on. What is the lowest you can charge? The minimum menu price. This one is worded weird. And again, it's kind of, I don't know if it's just my brain, but I think of it backwards than what you should. So this is basically asking you, what is the lowest price you can sell something to achieve this food cost percent? Because anything over, like if you sell it for anything more than this price, your food cost percentage will go down because you're selling it for more, but your ingredients cost the same. So going with that same steak platter ingredients example, if we spent $4.79 on it, on the dish itself, we want it to be 20% food cost. So what price would we need to sell this at to achieve 20% food cost or lower, basically? So you would take your $4.79 and you divide it by your food cost. Something really important to note here is you are dividing it by 0.2 or whatever your food cost percentage is as a decimal. Anytime you are dividing by a percentage, you are dividing by a decimal, not the percentage itself, by the decimal as a percentage. So same in week 4, you have yields and you divide by your yield percent. Same concept, you're always putting that decimal in. So if we have $4.79 and we divide it by 0.2, we get $23.95, meaning we have to sell this steak platter for $23.95 to achieve 20% food cost. Now, and I do really want to point this out because I am this person. If you are like me, and let's say you forget that you need your 20% as a decimal, and you just divide it by 20. With rounding, your answer is 24 cents. So again, just putting that in context to what it's asking you. Why on earth would you charge somebody 24 cents when you spent $4.79? You wouldn't. It makes no sense at all. You would be losing a ton of money. You'd be out of business so fast. So again, just one really easy way to double check your work. I can't stress that enough, is double check your work, look to see what you're doing. Let's say you forget you're dividing it and you multiply, because again, life happens and we all forget things. So let's say we multiply it by 0.2 because we forgot we were dividing. Again, with rounding, you get 96 cents. Why on earth would you charge somebody 96 cents when you spent $4.79? You wouldn't. So in a lot of these questions, you can do this with, and at least you can find out if you're wrong. It doesn't help you get closer to being right, but at least you know what not to do. And sometimes it's as easy as a simple flip-flop or a simple switch. And that really helps me. I don't know if it'll help you, but just read the question. What is this question asking me? Look at the information it gives you. Do your math, if math is even required, and then think of your final answer and get back to that question it's asking. And sometimes, something to note, a lot of times, some of the times, you don't have to do math at all. There will be questions on your test that might trick you, and they might ask you all these things, put all this math, all these numbers in your face. And it might be something as simple as, why are fresh onions better than pre-cooked onions? That has nothing to do with the cost of them. That's just literally as simple as fresh onions are better because they're fresh onions, right? So again, reading that question will really help you, really get you far. Kind of moving on, contribution margin. Your contribution margin is what is left over after you spent money on your ingredients. So what is left, not necessarily profit, but what is left over after we spent money on food. So same steak platter. If our steak platter costs us $4.79 for the ingredients to make, we sell it for $12. What is the contribution margin? So again, your contribution margin is just a simple subtraction. It's the difference between the two. So 12 minus $4.79, and we get $7.21. So basically your contribution margin is asking you how much is left over after you spent money on food. And in this case, it would be $7.21. It's not your profit because you have other things left over still to pay for, labor, other costs, things like that. And yeah, that one's pretty easy, I feel like. All right, week 4. This is the hardest stuff in my opinion. Breaking it down and understanding what it's doing and what it's asking, again, really helps. So when it asks you, what is the yield percent? Your yield percent is essentially how much usable amount did you have from what you bought. So you buy something, depending on what it is, you don't use it all. I mean, if you're buying an orange, I have this tiny little tangerine. I bought it, I had to pay for it. It's price per pound or price per whatever you're buying it for. But you have to peel it, you have stem, you throw away some, right? So you're not using everything, maybe not everything, but a lot of stuff does have waste. I mean, if you have beef or chicken or pork or anything you can think of, a lot of produce, onions, bananas, I mean, you have to buy it all, but you can't use it all. So finding that yield percent is essentially how much can you use in comparison to what you bought. Again, whenever you're finding a percentage, anytime you're doing the math in your calculator, it will always end up being a decimal. Always, always, always. If the answer is not a decimal, you did something wrong, for sure. And so that answer will always be a decimal. In order to get from that decimal to our percentage, you would multiply it by 100 or move the decimal 2 spots to the right. So going off that principle, if we have beef, we buy 10 pounds of it. After trimming and roasting it, we only have 7.5 pounds. So we spent money, we bought it 10 pounds, price per pound, but we can only use 7.5. So what is your yield percent is literally asking you how much can you use in comparison to what you bought. So you would take your ending weight, whatever you have left, and you divide it by your starting weight. So if you do 7.5 and we divide it by 10, that gets us 0.75. Again, it's a decimal, getting it to be a percentage, times it by 100, and we get 75%, right? So basically this is telling us 75% of this 10 pounds of beef we can actually use and sell to a customer. That is your yield percent in a nutshell. Now again, dyslexic person over here, let's say you flip-flop and you do your start weight divided by your end weight. So if that's the case, 10 divided by 7.5 we get 1.333. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, chef, that's a decimal. I see a decimal in there. Okay, I hear you. I see you. Let's multiply this decimal by 100, because that's what you have to do with decimals to get them to a percentage. And we end up with 133%. So again, just putting that answer in context to the question. Why on earth would you have more than what you started with when you have waste and scrap? You won it. It makes 0 sense. You literally could not have more than what you bought, unless it's like some weird like kefir milk product or yeah, but that's a whole different thing. Anyway, so essentially anytime you're doing this, it's really easy to double check that math. If you're doing it the other way, it's not going to make sense. Your answer is going to be out of whack and you'll know, crap, I did something wrong. Try it again, flip flop them. So going with that next example, because this is some hard stuff. Crate of bananas weighs 42 pounds. That's what we bought. After peeling, they weigh 28 pounds. What is your yield percent? Again, what is your usable portion? We ended with 28 pounds. So you take your 28 and you divide it by 42. Something to note here, I really don't think you see it on your test, but I want to prepare you. Like all things that we're doing in this class, you want to be in the same unit of measure. So if they give you 1 in pounds and 1 in ounces, you're going to have to convert the pounds to ounces. They give you gallons and cups, you're going to have to convert down to cups. Anytime in any of these, you got to be in that same unit before you start doing your math. With yield percents, I don't think they do that at all, but I just want to prepare you so you understand how to do it if you need to. Typically speaking, on that same realm, you're always going to the smaller unit. Can you go to the larger unit? Yes, you definitely can. If that's the way your brain works and you like it better, stick with what you know and what's working for you. If you don't know, the smaller unit, like if you have pounds and ounces is easier. Gallons and cups is easier. It's always easier to do the math going to a smaller unit because the reason behind it is there's just less decimals, less room for error, less smaller numbers really, versus if you're trying to get something from ounces to pounds, you're going to end up with things like 0.125 pounds. And then there's just more room for error, really. You can do it though. So again, if your brain works that way, go with whatever your brain knows, because it's really hard to rewire the way your brain thinks. That's a whole different conversation. But moving on, so now we know how to find our yield percentage. Again, I can't stress this enough. Read your question. Some of your questions will ask for a yield percentage. Some will ask for an EP price. Sometimes it'll give you a yield percentage, sometimes it won't. So knowing what you need to do to find your answer, and sometimes you have to do a couple steps. So going on, edible portion price. Your edible portion price is basically asking you, we bought it for this much a pound. So that's your as purchase price, your AP price. That's how much you spent on it. Your yield tells you, basically you can't use it all. Your yield equates for the waste that you have and that you're gonna be scrapping some of it out. So same thing with that beef, costs $5.99 a pound. That's how much we spent on it, but it has a 68% yield, meaning we can only use 68% of that beef that we used to serve our customers. Your edible portion price is basically adjusting it from the price you paid to the price that it actually is for how much you can use. Now, something to note here, again, just another trick. Your EP price will always, and I mean always, be more than your as purchase price. Unless your yield is 100%, then it's the exact same price. But if you have any yield at all, your EP price will be more. If you do the math and your EP price is less than what you bought it for, again, just thinking about it in context to what it's asking, why would you spend less on something when you bought it for this and you had waste? You wouldn't. That literally makes 0 sense. So Again, when we're dividing by a percentage, by our yield percent, you don't divide by 68, you would divide by 0.68. So in that same realm, doing the problem, if we have $5.99 is what we bought our beef for. We know we can only use 68% of that, or there's only 68% yield. Take that and we would divide it by 0.68. And we get 8.8088235, lots of numbers. With rounding, that would be $8.81. So basically what this is telling us, although we spent $5.99 a pound, we're really actually paying $8.81 a pound for what we can use. So when you're costing out your menu and your recipes on an actual like real life situation, if you don't do this and you don't equate for your waste in your pricing, you're going to be out of business faster than you can blink, because you're not factoring in everything you're chucking in the trash. Hopefully you find other ways to use it. Like if you have beef, you have your fat, your bones, maybe you can make a stock out of it. Maybe, and your orange, you can use that zest, or you can use the grind or the peel in like a cocktail. Who knows? Those you still can't equate, and you still have to make up the difference or do the math for your yield and your recipe, because that's something else. But anyway, that's just in context to the real world. The less waste you have, the better. The more you can use, the better. That is just, should be obvious, but good to say. So kind of like walking through one, and this is a two-part one. So if it asks you, what is your edible portion price, but you don't know your yield, you have to have your yield first. So you'll have to figure out your yield, and then you can do it. And then you can do your edible portion price. So if we have 15 pounds of onions, a case onions cost $2.99 a pound. After peeling and caramelizing, there are 2.9 pounds of onions. And it's asking, what is the edible portion price? Well, because I just told you, your edible portion price, you need a yield. So first step would be figuring out your yield, figuring out your waste, how much can you use? So you take your ending weight, your 9.2, and you would divide that by 15, what you bought. That gets us 0.613333. If this was asking what yield percent, we would know it's 61%, but we're not asking that. So again, reading your question, I just want to shake all of you. Read your question, because it will tell you what it's looking for. So I swear, if you put in the yield percent and it's asking you your edible portion price, you only did half the problem. So now that we have our 61% as our yield, we can now figure out our yield, or our edible portion price with that yield. So you have your $2.99. It's what we bought them for a pound. We know we can only use 61%. So you would divide by 0.61, and you get $4.90. So essentially what it's saying, although you spent $2.99 a pound, really you're spending $4.90 a pound for how much you can actually use. So some of them are two-parters. Some of them have you compare them, like which
Can you
one.
go back real quick, Chef? I'm sorry. There you go. Just give me 1 second. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to take a quick picture of it, Joy, if that would help. Kind of going with the same principle. Some of your questions with your EP price is it'll tell you your pre-cooked onions with 100% yield, and then you'll have your fresh onions with a, whatever yield you have. And then it'll ask you like, which one's better? Which one's better from a cost perspective? So when you see questions like that, you do have to figure out both. Now, granted, if you have 100% yield, you don't have to do math, you can, but essentially there is no scrap, there is no waste. You're using 100% of what you bought, meaning your EP price is the exact same as your AP price. And so when you have questions like that, you basically have to compare the two. So you have to figure out your edible portion price of the one, and then of the one with the scrap and the waste. And then you have to compare it with what the one with 100% yield is. Sometimes it'll ask you from, a quality perspective. And that, again, is no math. So a lot of these, again, just reading that question and understanding what are they asking, because it might seem like they're tricking you. They're not trying to trick you, but reading that question will get you so far. Same thing with week 5 stuff. This is another one where you have a lot of information, a lot of words, a lot of stuff going on, and you don't need it all the time. Week 5 things, I really just skipping the entire question, the entire thing, really, all that information, skipping it all and going to what the question is, reading the question, going back to the information, and then picking out everything you need to find that problem or to find that answer to your problem. That will be very, very helpful. And so like your first step when your week 5 and your inventory and your total, like total food costs, total food cost percentages, inventory, things like that. When it asks you how much did she spend on food, how much did she buy, how much was bought, how much was spent, that is asking you basically to total up all the purchases, to add them together. So reading this question, we start the week off with $284 of food. Okay, and that's what you started with. You didn't buy it, you started with it, can't count it. During the week, I buy, red flag, or in this case, a purple flag. You buy $294 of meat, $682 of dairy, $852 of produce. At the end of the week, we have $385 of food left. It's not anything we bought. Sales aren't relevant. So basically, this is just asking you, total up those numbers of things you spent, things you bought. Now, something really important, and I feel like a lot of you are doing this, and you're not alone, so it's okay, is you are mixing up your total food cost with your purchases. Your purchases is everything you spent money on. So if you went to Meijer, you can tell where I live by saying that. If you went to the grocery store and you bought $150 worth of food, you spent that. That is a purchase, right? And then you go to Walmart and you spend $80. That's a purchase. You add them up. So this is just straight addition, adding up everything you bought. Now, moving on to the next one, what is your total food cost? Your total food cost is different than your purchases. Your total food cost is basically asking you, how much did you spend on food that you also served, that also left your kitchen, that you no longer have? So this is where you take that beginning inventory, which is what you started with. So whatever you have in your kitchen, in your pantry, in your walk-in cooler, everything, that's your beginning inventory. Like right now at your house, you probably have flour, butter, milk, whatever. You have stuff at your house right now. That's your beginning inventory. You would then add in all your purchases to your beginning inventory. So everything we just found out, everything you spent money on throughout the week, you add into that. So in this example, your $284 plus how much you spent on meat, dairy, and produce all together, add them all up. And then you subtract your ending inventory at the end of the week. Because essentially the food you have left in your kitchen or your pantry or your walk-in, you still have left. You still have to use it. You're going to use it the next week. You didn't get rid of it. You bought it and it's still sitting there for you to use. So your ending inventory is basically what's left in your kitchen. So you subtract it because you can't count that as food costs because you haven't actually served anyone the food you spent on that money. So this is how you get your total food cost, which is different than your purchases. So I don't know how many people go to the purchases and start doing the whole equation. Again, read your question, read it, because it'll say how much did she spend on food or how much did she buy? How much were her purchases? Not total food cost. Total food cost is different. So moving on, kind of just finishing up the ending principles. How much did she spend on something, or how much more did she spend on produce than dairy? Again, I really, really like reading the question, going back to the information. Because if you read that question on your test, how much more did you spend on produce than dairy? That question literally is telling you, you need your produce price and you need your dairy price. The rest of the information is irrelevant. So you can go back to your word problem and you can pick and choose what you need out of it. So kind of looking through it, we start the week with $284 food. Irrelevant, we buy $294 meat, okay? $692 dairy. That's one of the numbers you need. $852 of produce. Again, that's one of the numbers you need. So picking and choosing what you need out of there will really help you. And you basically are just finding the difference between the two. So it's subtraction. So you take your 852 minus your 692, and your answer is 160. So this is basically telling you you spent $160 more on produce than you did on dairy this week, is what you're answering. Moving on, that's the same thing for those wondering. Your total food cost percentages. So again, this is the exact same thing we did in week 3, but now you're thinking of it big picture, big, like through the whole week. And so when you're looking at that, you need to find your total food cost first. So if you get this question and you don't know your total food cost, you then would have to do this problem to get your total food cost to be able to answer this problem. So sometimes it's a two-parter and you have to do a couple steps to get there, but understanding what you need to get the problem or to get the answer is really helpful. And when you're talking food cost percentages, it's basically asking you what percent did you spend on ingredients of food in comparison to what you made? So you would take your total food cost and you would divide it by your sales. So in this question, different numbers, we start the week with $3,520 of food. During the week, I buy $7,251 of food. At the end of the week, we have $3,850 of food left. For the sales for the week were $15,278. So again, you would need to find out your total food cost. So you would add your beginning inventory plus your purchases minus your ending. If you do all of that math, you get $6,925. Once you get your $6,925, you would divide it by your sales, which was $15,278. Again, you should always get a decimal because it's a percentage. And then you would multiply it by 100 or move that decimal 2 spots to the right. And we end up with 45% as our food costs. Basically, again, it's telling you we spent 45% of what we made in income on just ingredients alone. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Read the question, people. Jumping in, and again, I just want to point out something to you because I was working with somebody and I really liked this tip. So with this stuff, you'll see a question like this. You'll be given all this information, inventory, purchases, ending inventory, sales. Some people have been struggling with what to do with the food cost percentage. And again, just breaking down that question will really help you. So if you see this question here, what is her total food cost as a percentage of sales? You're like, crap, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to answer that. Think of the question. Think of what is this asking? Breaking it down. This is asking us her total food cost. So you know right now, you're going to need to know her total food cost as a percentage of sales. So that tells you your answer should be in a percentage. And it tells you you need her sales, right? So breaking it down and making, even though the question's very simple, only a few words, breaking down what it's asking you will really help because now you know you need to find her total food cost and you know you need to find that total food cost associated as a percentage with her total sales. So again, wow, that hour went really fast. Just reading your question, breaking it down, making it easier than it needs to be. These are kind of your week 5 things. Some of them will ask you a yield. They'll give you your AP price. They'll give you what she sells it for, but it's only asking you what the yield is. Your yield is your ending weight divided by your beginning weight. What she sells it for doesn't even matter at all. So a lot of those are going to be very helpful to you. And anytime you're doing these, just Some just helpful pieces of advice is read that question, reread the question. When you're doing your math in your calculator, do it twice, do it a few times, because as I have found, it's very easy. I call it fat fingering. It's easy to fat finger something and accidentally hit that 5 instead of a 6, or maybe you hit a 7 instead of an 8. And now your answer is wrong because you just hit the wrong button in your calculator. So once you find the answer, do it again, exact same way, and make sure you get the same answer. Because if you don't, you definitely did something wrong in your calculator. And that's an easy way to check that. Again, if you flip-flop which way you're supposed to divide, it's really easy to know that that answer is going to be so far off, it should scream red flag. So anytime you get your answer, put that answer in to your question and just think, does that make sense? Like, would my yield percent really be 642%? Because no, that makes no sense at all. But does anyone, I know that was a lot of information really quickly. I hope it helps some of you recap. Again, all those recordings are there for you to use, to watch, all those helpful hints your chef shows you under each test. Use them, have them printed out. But is there any last minute questions I can answer for you right now? Awkward silence. I'm gonna just kind of.
That's so funny.
No one said anything. I'm really bad with like pausing and letting you guys unmute yourself to ask your question. So I'm literally just gonna sit here until someone asks me something or until it's my time, 4 p.m. Yeah, you're welcome,
Yeah.
Jameson.
I know I've been having one of the problems with the numbers and everything. And like you said, it is one of those things that you have to try to take your time and try to read it carefully and step by step. Because honestly, like that's probably one of my problems. Like I'm just reading it too fast and just trying to hurry up and get a number in there instead of taking my time. So I totally understand when you're saying take your time, read it carefully, step by step to get what you need to get.
For sure. I know I'm that way. I'm
It's
very
kind of too late too. Kind of too late too, because it's what, like almost the end of the trimester or the semester. So yeah.
it'll help you going forward.
Yeah, a lot of helpful information, but not quite sure how it's gonna help for the last few weeks ahead.
Definitely.
Or
And I know
in the future that I
definitely. And I do that. I'm very like, oh, numbers, oh, math. And then I put it in my calculator and I'm like, I got the answer, done. And like, I think we're all notorious for doing something like that. And then you're like, oh crap, that's the wrong answer. I got it wrong. So taking your time, reading the full question, because a lot of these questions, they're going to give you more information than you need, or they're going to give you like 6 different numbers and you only need 2 of them. So understanding which numbers you need, what the question's asking. Is it even asking you to do math? I mean, I was working with a student. He's not here, so I'm not throwing him under the bus yesterday. And he sat there. We were working on a problem. I'm not even joking. We were working on a problem for like 10 minutes. And he was going through the math and doing this, divided by this, multiplied by this. And I'm like, and that gets you what? And he kept telling me different numbers and different answers. And the question was literally asking, why are fresh onions better?
That's so funny.
Oh it's true though. Yeah. I'm like, we've all probably done it, but yeah. And it's like, and at the end he was like, are you serious? Like that was the answer. And I'm like, yep, you did really good on all your math, but it's not asking you to do math.
That's super funny. A lot of us, it happens.
Does. Yeah. I'm like, I do it too, but just take your time. I think you guys have got it. If you don't, watch the recordings. I know I'm saying that, which is not ideal, but right now we're on our last day of the class. So That's kind of the only way to catch yourself up if you are struggling with something right now. Oh, Quizlets. On our tutor page, there are some Quizlet flashcards for a lot of this stuff, a lot of these principles that you can work through yourself. I'm going to show you real quick.
Okay, and then do we get points for watching the videos or no? Are they just helpful?
They're just helpful. They're just resources for you to use. You don't have to by any means, but if let's say you're struggling with week 4, the yield stuff, and you need extra practice, you can go to those recordings, and between Chef Sissy and I, we have a few of them out there, and you can see everything that we talked about during that workshop. So those are all right here in this archives in the tutor page. These Quizlets at the very bottom, though, I don't think I pointed this out, your extra resources, Quizlet digital flashcards. If you click into this, this will bring you to our tutor page. And I have made, I don't think I've done all of them, but different things for your costing class. So whether that be portions, price proportions, contribution margin, food cost inventory, week 5. I didn't get creative with that title. They're all in here, and they are just questions that you can flip through and answer yourself in different, like the total sales are this, you spent this, what is your food cost? These are ones you can kind of go through yourself if you need some extra help and extra practice. And these are just resources for you here for you guys to use.